Welcome to this edition of Simsbury School News. My name is Dominique Avery. My guest today is the new principal of Simsbury High School. Finding and hiring the right new principal in Simsbury is a long process. It began last March with a survey and focus groups of students, parents, and faculty members, followed by lots of interviews. Finally, the new principal was appointed by the Board of Education at the end of May, and he began work on July 1st. We are honored today that Andrew O'Brien has taken the time to join us in his first few weeks so that the community, as well as parents, teachers, and students, can get to know him better. Welcome to Simsbury, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So my first question is, as you start out, you began here July 1st, but the students didn't come till almost a month later.
Sure.
What are your first impressions of the school?
Well, my first impressions really are that it is a flagship school. Really is a high school unlike any other. And that's something that became apparent to me during the search process, during the interview process, as I did my investigations. And then it's just been validated in the time that I've been there throughout the summer. When I came my first day that I pulled into the driveway, the students had actually painted "Welcome, Mr. O'Brien" on the rock that was out front, and that just really spoke volumes to me, to be welcomed so warmly. Prior to that time, after things had been finalized, I did come to visit the school, to see the school in operation, to meet with the staff. Mr. Sullivan was wonderful in arranging for those dates for me to be there and see kids and meet the teachers. They had a warm reception for me. So it really was just terrific. And all of my experiences with the staff and students have just validated that this is a school unlike any other.
That's very good to hear. So it seems that you're happy that you made the move.
Certainly.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background? You started as a teacher. What made you want to teach and then move into administration?
So it's interesting. Initially, I was very interested in becoming a marine biologist. And I started in my senior year in college by volunteering at the Maritime Aquarium at Norwalk. And as I worked there, I started just simply speaking as a volunteer to parents and students and members of the community around a touch tank, and that evolved into doing behind-the-scenes tours, securing a paid position, and ultimately teaching on the research vessel, a 42-foot trawler on the Norwalk Harbor, which is a beautiful harbor if you've ever been down there.
I've actually not been here.
Yeah, that was my first foray into teaching. It's something that I did, and my dad was the one that said, "Hey, you might want to consider teaching." So I did take him up on that. I went to Quinnipiac University through their Master of Arts in Teaching program. It was a very intense 18-month program. So for a year, I was a full-time substitute at Middletown High School. And then at night, pretty late at night, I would have my classes at Quinnipiac. And that is where basically I learned a tremendous amount. I could observe all of the teachers. In addition to substituting for classes, I was able to see some great teachers and learn a tremendous amount about teaching. To the point where I was entering my student teaching, and I received a call from my future boss at the time, Dan DiGiulio, who asked me if I would be interested in teaching in an agriculture program, which was essentially a field biology placement where I would be teaching marine biology and aquaculture and environmental science and forestry, a lot of hands-on applied sciences. So that was very exciting, and I did that for 12 years.
Where was that?
That was at Middletown High School.
That was at Middletown.
At Middletown High School. And throughout that time, I had a chance to be engaged in some great national level and state level contests in forestry and environmental science. I coached public speaking, which was great. Developed some really wonderful diversity programs where we looked at life and agriculture and science in other countries, in India, et cetera. Did some really interesting things. There was a great project related to this gentleman named Venture Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, who was
yes,
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I participated in that project.
Why don't you explain a little who Venture Smith
Oh, yeah,
is?
Venture Smith, the son of an African prince taken into slavery, later transported to Stonington, Connecticut, where he lived as a slave, but eventually he was able to earn his freedom as an adult, as a man, and buy back the freedom of his family. I stumbled on his story when I lived in Haddam. There was a short little newspaper there, I think it was the Haddam Bulletin, that talked about this work that was going on around Indians and some of their archaeological digs, and then as a sideline it mentioned Venture Smith. So I dug deeper into that, and it turned into a wonderful program where we were able to go with students to visit the archaeological site, where they're trying to make that a National Heritage Site right now. I was able to connect with Chandler Saint, who was behind this project, this big renaissance around Venture, and we developed a series of lessons. We took three major things from that story, from his story. One of them is the importance of being able to overcome adversity, because in his story it was a real hard life that he had. Hard work, because that's how he was able to overcome and conquer slavery. And then finally that our freedom is a privilege, because there are still many people in the world that are not free.
I'm fascinated by the fact that you started out with subject matter. I personally believe that interest in a subject matter makes a good teacher rather than interest in studying education. So I think I'm fascinated by your story.
The passion has to start somewhere,
it
for
does.
sure.
And information is the best place, or a history or a subject matter is the best place for it to start. So, okay, so now you were doing this?
So I was doing this, and I was tapped to become an assistant principal. And at the time I'd said, I think I'm really enjoying my time in the classroom. I'm reluctant to make that step. So I declined that opportunity. That was at Middletown High School. So they hired a person to take that position, but she was unable to start until October in that following year. So they really needed somebody to cover that position for September and October. So my principal, Mr. Fontaine, said, I need you to do this. So I said, okay, all right, I'm going to do this. And as I did it, I found that I really did enjoy that. I had the opportunity to get to know that many more students, to work with the entire faculty, to really kind of explore another aspect of education. And I found that I got to know students much more closely, because I was working with them one-on-one. There really wasn't, the curriculum was not in between myself and the student. So I said, this would be something I think I would do if this position ever did present itself again. And then the following year it did. And as a result, I became the assistant principal at Middletown High School.
Now, did you have to go back for more education courses or a
Oh,
degree?
certainly, I
And
did.
how'd you
I did.
handle that?
I had been thinking about leadership, so I had, during that time, I had was able to get my 6th year in administration, educational leadership at Central Connecticut.
Now you're at Simsbury High School, and you were welcomed warmly, and you're happy that you're there. So what are the things that you're tackling first? What do you foresee that your work is going to be for the year?
Well, really, there are a number of items that I'm looking at, but the biggest piece of work that I have is to get to know everyone, to know the students, to know the staff members, to know the community, the history behind the school, what's made it so great. To be able to continue the good work that's been happening there. And I've been working at that. We've been doing some activities. We did a banner activity I did with our leadership team, and then the entire staff did, which is an activity where you create a poster that essentially talks about yourself, your name, its meaning, things that you value in your life, things that shaped you as a person, your goals, words that you live by, things that you do well. And in doing that, I found that it's helped me to get our staff to know the staff members much more closely, but also for them to know one another on a deeper level as well. Because we are engaging, right now we're embarking on a year-long self-study for NEASC. That is, so if we look at
NEASC?
The NEASC, New England Association of Schools and Colleges, it's a 10-year decennial cycle that any school or college of merit wants to have accreditation. They want to receive accreditation. So obviously that is something that we are a part of. When we look at the work of the school, that is one of the major items. So my work to get to know staff members, this is also helping staff members to get to know one another as they work on NEASC. All of the teachers are involved. They're a part of 7 different committees. So you've got teachers that are working aside one another that may not normally interact that closely from across disciplines. So this has enabled them to get to know themselves and one another more deeply as they work together on that.
Is that important? Is that part of your idea of leadership, is that the team that you work with, they have to know each other better?
Oh yeah, certainly.
And that's
certainly.
difficult at a high school, that it's a large high school.
It can be, for sure. When you have, I mean, high schools in general, you tend to be compartmentalized and working in your area on a fairly fixed schedule. So yeah, that's important, I think, for people to be able to support one another, but also to capitalize on the expertise that's within the building. Knowing some areas of strength that some people may have, or even to serve as a guest speaker. It's pretty amazing when you start to dig deeper to find out how much experience really resides in your building.
Exactly, or like I just found out about you, your
That's
marine
true.
biology background. I have heard only good things about you so far, but one of the first things I heard was that you made some physical changes to the school. Can you
That's
tell us
true.
a little bit
That's
about
true.
that?
So some of the things that we've done are to kind of naturalize the school a bit. One of the things we have, this was in my last school in Woodbury, there were ivy that were hanging in the main hallway. And that's something that the visiting committee, the people that had come, Mr. Petrina and others had commented on and said, that would be really wonderful to bring that to our school. So we did. We have ivy on chains and fairly substantial planters when you enter the main hallway outside of the auditorium that are there. One issue that I was made aware of was an issue around lunch, that our cafeteria was pretty crowded. So much so that some students would seek other areas to have lunch in the hallways throughout the building, and that was problematic, I think, from a safety standpoint, but also from a matter of cleanliness and having things out. But we do have a nice outside area on the east entrance of the building where there were already a couple of picnic tables. So this summer we enhanced that area. If you drive by the school and you look to the right, you'll see 3 bright umbrellas and round tables that are there. We have wraparound benches, one of them that's under a tree, another one that's around one of the light fixtures. And we just placed today some large planters that are pretty large. They're about 4 feet tall and 3 feet in diameter, not much smaller than this table, that will be planted. And I think it's important for students to be able to get outside at some point, to eat lunch together outside. So weather permitting, that is an area that we've created. On days when the weather is not so nice or when we can't be outside, we're going to open the amphitheater as an additional space for students to be in.
Well, I'm sure the students have been enthusiastic about that.
They have.
Yeah, and especially the past
weather's
few weeks,
been
which have been
wonderful.
very nice but hot. You also mentioned earlier peer observation, something that's going on this year. What is that?
Yeah, peer observation is actually teachers watching other teachers teach and learning from them. And this is something that is it's a district focus this year. So all the buildings are working on capitalizing on this. It's one of the best forms of professional development that we know of. There are times when it's beneficial to bring someone in, an outside specialist, to talk to you about strategies or procedures, but oftentimes our teachers will learn best from their colleagues, from our master teachers that are within our buildings. And across disciplines. So that's the idea here. This was something that at the high school level was done last year. It was kind of piloted last year. Mr. Sullivan would do guided walkthroughs where teachers that would go and they would have a chance to pop into classrooms and see instructional strategies. And also the great thing is to see maybe their students in another environment and how they may respond to some of the things that are happening there. So this year, it's part of our professional growth plans or our goals that teachers are writing. We're asking them to look at the Simsbury Public School standards. There are 7 standards, teaching standards, to choose from one of those areas and reflect and say, this is an area that I think I'd like to really grow in this year, whether it's assessment or instruction or collaboration or et cetera, and then set a goal to say, I would like to learn a bit more about this. I'm going to try some of these strategies, and then when my colleagues come from my PLC, my professional learning community group, my fellow teachers, when they come in, they'll be able to give me feedback. And then based on that feedback, they could then refine their skills in that area to become better teachers.
Interesting. This seems to be right up your alley. Going back to the way you became a teacher, you did a lot of observations
Oh, yeah.
at the beginning.
It's really valuable because you're in your building. They're the same students, the same environment. But some of these strategies, if I'm teaching constantly, I may not have a chance to pop out and see what's happening next door or down the hall. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I was a teacher for 5 years, and I found that teaching was the loneliest profession, especially
It can be.
because you're by yourself with the teachers and you don't have a lot of exchanges with other teachers unless you make an effort to do something like that. Simsbury High School is called a comprehensive high school. What does that mean?
I would say that means it's a high school that meets a broad spectrum of needs, that really presents opportunities and learning for students in many different areas, as opposed to being a school that would specialize. I know there's some magnet schools that specialize in sports medicine or that specialize in marine science. Comprehensive high school is really going to provide students with an array of opportunities and learning, so that I think they're going to have a really solid foundation.
Let me move on to sort of a little more subject matter, or at least high school subject matter. This year, the governor announced that students in the junior year will not be expected to take those new SBAC tests, that they're going to be able to, that they'll be tested by using the SATs. What did you think about that when they decided to do that?
Well, I thought it made a lot of sense. One of the things we're realizing is our students are assessed. They can be assessed pretty heavily, and at some point we want to really think about what's the point of assessment, and assessment should make sense, in that it's going to inform our instruction. It's going to tell us where our students are. It's going to allow us to then respond and then help them to reach greater heights. So students already were taking, many of them were taking the SAT in their junior year. So the removal of the Smarter Balanced assessment, I think, does make sense, in that that allows students to focus on fewer assessments, but assessments that I think are meaningful. I know the SBAC assessment was meaningful in that it was connected to the Connecticut standards, but the SAT is now being retooled, so it will be connected to the standards as well.
So there was recent stories in the news about the fact that SAT scores have dropped. And what was your reaction to that? You have considerable experience with high school students over a number of years. Is that a meaningful thing that people should pay attention to?
Well, I think we do look, we watch those scores. They have dipped somewhat, but that's just one marker. That's one indicator. So, just as though if you were to go to your doctor, there are different measures, there's different things we're looking at. We want to make sure that we're looking at a number of different measures. And now this will change with our new SAT. So it will be interesting to see how our students perform and how other students perform. We're feeling fairly confident, though, because we did so well on the Smarter Balanced assessment, that if the SAT is aligned to the Connecticut standards, that we should have a good showing in March on the newly revised SAT.
Yeah, and I saw on Patch this morning as we're taping this that Simsbury students did above the national average and above the Connecticut average.
Yeah, we're very proud.
Right. Another question. Describe your typical day. What does a principal do for those people who haven't been in a school in a while?
All right, so my typical day, what I do is I try to arrive a little bit before 7, so it's an early day. So I can get in, just review my notes briefly. I have my schedule laid out. I tend to have a day that is scheduled fairly closely. I grab my walkie-talkie and I go out to the east entrance of the building, and I like to greet students when they get off the bus. That's just one of the things that I like to do. So I will do that. So you'll find me out there saying hello, good morning, happy Friday, great game last night. That's my style, greeting students and staff members when they come in. Then at our warning bell, then I will enter the building. I'll try to frequent a different hallway each day, just again to greet staff and students. And then come in and meet with our assistants. This is something we're looking to do now, is just touch base in the morning very briefly, so we can compare notes as far as what our days look like. And then I will check in with Ms. Schwarm, who is my secretary, and I'm off and running. So I will tend to have scheduled meetings, but also scheduled time to be able to be out and about, to be in classrooms, to walk the building. I like to pop into the cafeteria and have some vegetables. There's these small cups you can get mixed vegetables in. I'll have some of those. Interact with students. As far as the meetings, they could be, usually I'm planning future events or collaborating with different department chairs or teachers or club advisors for the things that are happening in our school.
I just realized that we skipped over a large part of your background, and we went from Middletown High School right to Simsbury, but there was something in between.
That's true. That's true. There was Nonnewauk High School. And I was at Nonnewauk High School for just about 4 years. A terrific school, about
You were
half
the
the
principal
size.
there.
Yes, I was the principal there. About half the size of Simsbury High School. So about half the number of students, about half the number of faculty and staff. Wonderful community. Similar in that some very high performing groups of students that were there, and some excellent teachers.
That's Woodbury, right?
Yes.
Right. Now, did you address the graduates at Woodbury High School?
Oh, certainly, yeah.
So
yeah.
at graduation last year, what did you tell them?
Well, what I did was I reflected on the year. This was, I told them that we were graduating together because I had started with them when they were freshmen, and I was graduating with them at that time. And I recapped some of the memories that I would have, some of the really great times that we had together, some of the moments that I remembered, specifically in their senior year, which was more recent for them in their minds, whether it was some things on the athletic field or some performances or some shared memories. And then I wished them all the best of luck. I usually try to incorporate a quote into graduation, some sort of words of wisdom that will serve them. And then I wish them the best.
To go back to a question that I asked earlier, again, you said that you meet with your assistants. One of the criticisms I hear from people who are not in education is that there are so many administrators. Why does Simsbury High School need 3 assistant principals? So can you answer them?
Well, there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that happens in a school and to have a school run well, you need to have a team. You really need a solid team. One of the things that's changed is our evaluation system, and our evaluation system is fairly demanding as far as the contact hours for setting goals, and then everybody has a mid-year goal conference and an end-of-the-year conference. So if we divide our staff, and you can multiply that, there's a fair amount of meetings there, but also the observations, the formal and informal observations. And then having the assistants that are able to work closely with individual departments, and then all of the committees that they oversee, whether they're working on our student intervention team or they're working with master scheduling for a building of our size. It's a pretty complex operation, and each of the assistants tends to specialize.
And all of that is based on evaluation on making the school better, right?
Oh yeah, certainly. It's everything we do is about increasing our student performance.
Things are very different than they were 50 years ago, where there was less of a sort of follow-up on why things were happening. Teachers just told the kids to do it, and there was no testing. There was no testing when I was in teaching.
Yeah, it has changed. It's definitely evolved.
We don't have too much time left, but I wanted to touch on a sort of little bit of an unhappier subject matter. I read in the paper when a 2007 Simsbury High School graduate died this summer of a heroin overdose. His parents mentioned addiction in the obituary. And I know you haven't been here long, but have you had discussions with people? What kind of a problem is that in this community? And do you know what the community is doing to deal with it?
You know, again, I have not been here long, but over the summer I was aware of that instance. And as I spoke to people about it, they had said that there were certain classes going back that had definitely struggled with heroin addiction. I think that's something that every community has to be aware of. They have to be aware of drug and alcohol abuse, and just find ways to support students, be cognizant, know of the warning signs, know of how to intervene to help students make wise choices. Since I have been here, I have met to discuss that issue and supporting our students in general. We're interested in bringing in some folks that can be really inspirational and helping to talk about those things. I know there's a gentleman, Chris Herron, who we would like to be able to bring. In my former district, we did have him come speak to the entire faculty and staff. It was riveting. Really help people to understand that this is something that could happen to people that may have a very bright future, but it's a dark path, and it's something we definitely don't want students to have to make that mistake.
Simsbury High School is a very large school.
Sure.
And it is easy for students to get lost there and not have an adult that they see every day or contact. It's a difficult problem to solve.
Well, really, when you look at a school, and this is an analogy I often make, it's a city. So you're going to have representation, you're going to have a whole host of people and issues to contend with. And having close relationships are vital. And we do have SHS Connect, which occurs 2 times a week for our freshmen through our junior class. But we also are having teachers, this is a good segue into the other component, teachers are working on developing supportive relationships. We had a panorama survey last year that went out to staff, to students, and to parents. And as we looked at that data across those areas, we identified some celebrations and we identified some areas of focus. And the area of focus that came out was the need to develop supportive relationships across the board.
Yeah, that's true.
So that is something that our teachers are crafting individual goals. How will they connect more deeply with their students? And we cited some research that there was a great report called Changing the Odds, What Matters Most, and it came out of the McCrell Foundation. And there's a lot of great educational minds that went into crafting this, and they said effective teachers, they of course they need to know their subject matter. They need to use a number of different teaching strategies and know how to use them adroitly at different times to meet the needs of their students. But then what really carried the day there was our connection was having meaningful supportive relationships with students, something that they called being warm demanders. So your students know you care about them, you're prepared, you support them and you believe in their ability, but you're also going to demand their best work from them.
I'm really glad to hear that. I have to interrupt you there because our time is up.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure.
It's been a real pleasure for me to get to know you a little bit better. I'd also like to thank everyone here at SCTV behind the scenes for their help in getting the show on the air. And of course, thank you for watching. If you missed any part of this very interesting interview, you can always watch it on our website. Just go to simsburytv.org, where you can also see the schedule of when shows air actually on TV. I'm Dominique Avery. See you next time for Simsbury School News.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.